One specific asset we want to take a look at is the blend space. Blend spaces are assets designed to allow us to smoothly transition between animations using values such as speed, direction, or even multiple values at once. Let's go ahead and take a look at our default blend space in our third person template. In the bottom left, we have content, mannequin, and then animations. Inside the animations folder, we have the third person idle run 2D blend space. We're going to open it up and let's just take a quick look at the important parts. Should look like any other standard editor window, viewport in the middle, a couple detail tabs. But on the bottom, we have this graph that allows us to control our blend space. And on the right, we have our asset browser for our animations. How this works is our animations are added to our graph, and then we set up when and how they should blend together. On the left, in our asset details, we have our horizontal axis. Now, this is a one-dimensional or 1D blend space. We have one axis, which is horizontal in this case. There are two-dimensional ones, and we'll look at those as well later. But for our example purposes, this one has one axis, and it's been named speed, because this will feed in a value or velocity or the speed that the character will be moving and determine which animation will be playing, idle, walking, or running. The minimum and the maximum axis values determine the minimum and the maximum values you're going to feed in to determine which animations will be playing. In our example, it's the speed of the character between the minimum and the maximum that it's going to be allowed to run. You have the number of grid divisions. So how many different grids are there? If we were to adjust this, at the bottom, you can see it increasing and decreasing. This gives us more finer granularity between when we might want an animation to be played out. If we look at the bottom, we can see on the far left, we have third person idle if I mouse over this diamond. This is my third person idle animation that we're going to want to play at this speed value. Next to it, on the next graph point, we have the third person walk. And then farther over, all the way at the end, we have a third person run. This allows us to have a much smaller amount of speed needed to go from idling to walk, and then a much larger distance from walking to running. And that's determined by the number of grid divisions. Interpolation time determines how long it can take to go from one animation to the next, or from one animation to the next in a row. The higher this is, the longer it will take. If you need to get a little bit of blend in or blend out, a little bit of weight, you might want to adjust that. Note, it can have some really weird effects. So for example, I change this to 1 and we test it. Rather than smoothly going between each of my animations, you'll see there's a little bit of a start and stop because we have a 1-second interpolation. We'll change that back. Blend samples. Now this part's important because these are the actual animations that we're going to be sampling from to determine the output. In this case, you can see we have our idle. It's set to fire off at 0.0 for the value. It's going to play the third person idle animation. Its rate of playback is 1.0, so normal speed. And we've set it to snap to the grid when we're laying it out. If you wanted, you can adjust these. Let's say, for example, you didn't want the walk to be here or you had a different animation to swap out. You can just change the different animation here. Or if you're working inside of your graph, let's say we don't want our walk anymore. We just want to go from idle to run. We can click on it, click the delete key, and now we no longer have that in here. And now our character is going to go from idling right to running with no walk in between. Now you may notice I was previewing it. If you hold on the little green diamond, that'll allow you to preview as you drag it back and forth along the axis. If we want to put this back, we just simply figure out which animation we want. In this case, it would be the walk. Drag it and drop it. And you'll notice it's snapping with a little gray icon between each point. Let's put it back to here. And now we go from idling to walking to running. And of course, if you want it to be more, let's say a really long walk and then a really short amount to run, you just adjust it based on where it is on this graph. Below these, we have some things like our animation physics assets if we want to override anything or test. Sample interpolation. When we're using a 2D, this is very useful if you need to go, for example, like it mentions, from left to right, but you also have a forward animation in there. Without any interpolation, it's going to snap between each of your animations. With some weight interpolation, allow it to more smoothly determine where you're going based on the speed. All these other settings we don't really need to worry about for now, just these main setups. Here's something to note. If you happen to be dragging your rate scale, let's say we want to make our idle run faster, so we're going to drag this up to a higher value. And then we go ahead and save this, and we go to play. We're going to run into an error. Can't play in editor when performing edit rate scale operation. If you run into an error where it says can't play in editor, your map is just kind of a little bit dirty. Just hit save, and you can try again, and you'll notice it's going to play fine. And going back to that interpolation, let's say we change this to 2 for idle, and we go ahead and check out our preview. You'll notice our idle animation is running twice as fast as normal. Or you could even do 0.5, and your idle animation will run smoother. Let's change this back to 1, save this, we'll close this down. And those are the basics of your blend space.